I am Elaine, 32 years old, and I never expected my birthday to become a family battleground. After a grueling week at the accounting firm, I still managed to host my own celebration, complete with homemade appetizers and decorations. Meanwhile, my younger brother Dylan strolled in an hour late, bearing an expensive gift he definitely couldn't afford. Mom beamed at him like he hung the moon. As I leaned over to blow out my candles, her words sliced through me. "You know, you have always been jealous of your brother." That moment changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up for yourself against family who took you for granted. Growing up in our modest suburban home in Michigan, the roles were clear from an early age. I was expected to be the responsible one, the achiever, the one who would make sensible choices. Dylan, 3 years younger, was the free spirit who needed protection and endless second chances. Our parents never explicitly said they had different standards for us, but their actions spoke volumes. When I was 8, I saved my allowance for 6 months to buy a bicycle. Mom and Dad praised my discipline, but reminded me that financial responsibility was simply expected of me. When Dylan turned 8, they surprised him with a bike twice as expensive as mine because, as Mom explained, he would be too impatient to save up. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. I learned to anticipate it, but that never made it hurt less. In high school, I maintained a 4.00 GPA while working weekends at the local grocery store. My academic achievements were acknowledged with brief nods and comments like, "Well, school always came easy to you." Meanwhile, when Dylan managed to pull his grades up from D's to C's, our parents threw a celebration dinner and bought him a new gaming system as a reward. College was where the divide grew even deeper. I attended State University on a partial scholarship and worked 30 hours a week to cover the rest. I graduated with minimal student loans and paid them off within 3 years by living frugally and picking up extra accounting projects. Dylan, however, bounced between 4 different colleges in 5 years, changing majors each time his courses became too demanding. Our parents paid his tuition in full, covered his apartment, and gave him a monthly allowance that exceeded my starting salary. "Your brother is finding himself," Mom would explain whenever I questioned this imbalance. "He is an artistic soul. You have always been more practical." Dylan's finding himself phase extended well into his 20s. He tried being a photographer, then a craft beer brewer, followed by a brief stint as a day trader, all ending in expensive failures. Each time our parents would bail him out, dipping into their retirement savings to fund his next venture. When I expressed concern about their financial future, Dad would shrug and say, "Family helps family." Except their definition of help seemed to apply differently to each of us. By 30, I had established myself as a senior accountant at a respected firm, purchased my own modest condo, and built an emergency fund that could cover 6 months of expenses. I rarely asked my parents for anything, not because I did not need support sometimes, but because I had learned early that my needs were considered optional, while Dylan's were urgent. The year before my 32nd birthday had been particularly challenging. Our company had taken on several major clients, which meant constant overtime and stress. I had also been helping a junior colleague navigate a difficult audit, essentially doing 2 jobs for several months. Through it all, I maintained my independence, never once asking my parents for assistance. Dylan, now 29, was still living in an apartment our parents paid for, driving a car they had financed, and consulting on social media marketing without any actual clients. His Instagram showed expensive restaurants, weekend trips, and designer clothes, all while he claimed to be hustling toward success. Last year's birthdays had set the tone for what I should expect. On Dylan's birthday, our parents rented out a restaurant's private room, invited 30 people, and presented him with a collection of high-end gifts. On mine, we had cake at their house after I worked a full day, and they gave me a blender because you are always so practical. I had long accepted that my achievements would never receive the same recognition as Dylan's mere existence. But accepting something does not mean it stops hurting. Each dismissal of my efforts, each extra allowance for his failures, built a wall of resentment brick by brick, until it stood so tall I could barely see over it to remember the times when we had actually been close as siblings. As my 32nd birthday approached, I tried to keep my expectations reasonable. I arranged to take the day off work, a rare luxury given my workload, and decided to host a small gathering at my condo. I invited our parents, Dylan, and a few close friends. I would cook, decorate, and create a warm celebration on my own terms. Perhaps this time, just once, I could be the center of attention on my special day. Little did I know that this birthday would become the breaking point that would force us all to confront the dysfunctional patterns we had been living with for decades. The morning of my birthday began with promise. Sunlight streamed through my kitchen window as I prepared a spread of finger foods and desserts. I had splurged on quality ingredients, decorative serving dishes, and even fresh flowers to make my home feel festive. The night before, I had stayed up until midnight, hanging streamers and arranging a photo display of happy memories from throughout the year, carefully curating moments that celebrated my achievements and friendships. My best friend Marie arrived early to help bringing a beautiful homemade cake. "You should not be cooking for your own birthday," she scolded gently, but understood when I explained that hosting gave me control over the day. "Just once I want a celebration that does not turn into the Dylan show," I told her as we arranged candles on the dining table. My parents arrived exactly on time, my father carrying a small gift bag and my mother immediately asking, "Is your brother here yet?" When I explained that Dylan was running late as usual, she frowned slightly. "I hope he did not forget. You know how busy he has been with his new business contacts." Those business contacts were, as far as I could tell, other unemployed 20-somethings who spent their days in coffee shops discussing theoretical startups while posting inspirational quotes on LinkedIn. But I bit my tongue and offered my parents drinks instead. An hour into the gathering, with most guests already enjoying their second helping of food, Dylan finally made his entrance. He swept in without apology for his tardiness, carrying an enormous gift box wrapped in expensive paper. "Happy birthday, sis," he announced loudly, drawing all attention to himself. "Wait until you see what I got you. It is absolutely perfect." My mother rushed to take his coat as if he were a visiting dignitary. "Dylan, you are so thoughtful. Look at the beautiful gift he brought Elaine." I smiled tightly, acutely aware that Dylan had never held a job long enough to afford whatever was in that box. The price tag would ultimately trace back to our parents, making it effectively a gift from them to me through him, for which he would receive the credit. "Open it now," my mother insisted, abandoning the conversation she had been having with my friend from work. Inside the box was a designer handbag, one I had admired months ago while shopping with Mom. It was beautiful but far too expensive for my practical budget. The fact that Dylan had remembered and chosen it might have been touching if I did not know the reality behind the gesture. "This is very generous," I said carefully. "Thank you. Only the best for my big sister," Dylan replied with a wink. "I remembered how much you wanted it." My mother beamed. "Your brother is so attentive. He always remembers what people like." The comment stung particularly since I was the one who sent birthday cards to relatives, remembered their children's names, and called our parents weekly. Dylan barely managed to text on holidays. As the evening progressed, the dynamic became increasingly clear. Every conversation somehow turned to Dylan's potential and plans. When my colleague mentioned my recent promotion, my mother nodded distractedly before turning to Dylan to ask about his latest networking opportunity. My father sat quietly, occasionally patting my shoulder, but saving his animated conversations for my brother. The moment that broke me came when Marie brought out the birthday cake. As everyone gathered around and began singing, I noticed my mother whispering something to Dylan, both of them glancing at me. The familiar childhood feeling of being disgusted, evaluated, and found wanting washed over me. When the singing ended and I leaned forward to blow out the candles, my mother put her hand on my arm. What I thought might be a rare moment of maternal affection turned into something else entirely. "You know," she whispered just loud enough for those closest to hear, "you have always been jealous of your brother. If you could just be more supportive of his journey instead of competing with him, you would be happier." The room seemed to freeze. Marie, standing nearby, inhaled sharply. My colleague looked down at her plate, suddenly fascinated by the frosting design. My father shifted uncomfortably but said nothing as usual. The candles flickered, waiting for a wish I no longer had the heart to make. In that moment, the accumulation of 32 years of unequal treatment of dismissed achievements and excused failures, of being the responsible one who was never quite good enough while watching my brother fail upward through life, crystallized into a perfect, sharp clarity. I felt something inside me crack. "Then let him pay your bills," I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence. My mother blinked, her hand still resting on my arm. "Excuse me. If Dylan is so amazing, and I am just jealous of his brilliant journey, then maybe he should start paying his own bills and yours too when you need it." The words came out with a calm I did not feel inside. My mother's face tightened. "Elaine, this is not appropriate conversation for your birthday party." Neither was accusing me of jealousy over my birthday cake. But here we are. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Do you know who paid for everything you are eating tonight? Who took the day off work to cook and clean and decorate? Who has never asked you for money since graduating college?" Dylan shifted uncomfortably, the smug expression slipping slightly from his face. "Come on, sis. Mom did not mean anything by it. You are making a scene. Am I funny how setting boundaries is making a scene, but showing up an hour late to a party is just Dylan being Dylan?" My father finally spoke up, his voice conciliatory. "Let's all calm down and enjoy the cake. Elaine has gone to a lot of trouble for this lovely evening. Thank you for noticing, Dad. It is nice that someone did." I turned back to my mother. "Do you want to know something interesting? Last month when Dylan told you he was this close to landing a major client, that was a lie. He has been telling you that for 2 years. My mother's face flushed. "You do not know anything about your brother's business. Actually, I do because his former roommate Josh works at my firm now. Dylan has not had a paying client in 18 months. He has been living entirely off your money while pretending to run a business." Dylan stood up abruptly. "You had no right to discuss my personal life with Josh. He mentioned it because he was concerned because, unlike you, some people actually worry about how their actions affect others." One of my friends quietly excused herself to the kitchen. Another checked her watch and murmured something about an early morning. The comfortable gathering was disintegrating around us, but I could not stop the words that had been dammed up for years. "Do you know what Mom and Dad got me for Christmas last year?" I asked Dylan directly. "A $50 gift card to an office supply store." "Do you know what they got you?" "They paid off your $5,000 credit card bill, the one you ran up buying those designer sneakers and that weekend in Vegas." "That is completely different," my mother interjected. "Your brother was going through a difficult time after his breakup with Amanda. And when I went through my divorce 3 years ago, when Jack left me for his coworker and I had to pay all the legal fees myself, what difficult time allowance did I get then?" My father looked genuinely surprised. "We offered to help, but you said you had it covered, because that is what you raised me to do, to handle things myself, to be responsible, to never expect handouts. Meanwhile, Dylan gets bailed out for every poor decision he makes." My mother's voice turned cold. "This is exactly the kind of jealousy I was talking about. Your brother has special talents that need nurturing. You have always been naturally capable. Capable is not the same as invulnerable, Mom. Being responsible does not mean I never needed support." Dylan, sensing the tide turning against him, tried a new approach. "Elaine, I appreciate everything you do. You are amazing, but we are just different people with different paths." Different paths. Your path has been lined with safety nets and second chances. Mine has been do it right the first time or deal with the consequences yourself. My mother stood up, gathering her purse. "I will not sit here and listen to you attack your brother on your birthday of all days. If you cannot appreciate the family that loves you and supports you, then perhaps we should leave." "Supports me?" I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "When was the last time either of you supported any choice I made? When I chose accounting instead of law school. Dad did not speak to me for a week. When I bought my condo in this neighborhood, instead of the one you preferred, Mom told everyone I was settling. Every achievement I have had has been minimized, while Dylan's smallest efforts are celebrated like he cured cancer." The remaining guests were now openly uncomfortable, some making discreet exits with apologetic glances in my direction. Marie stood firmly beside me, her presence a silent vote of confidence. My mother gathered her coat face, rigid with anger. When you have calmed down and are ready to apologize to your brother, we can discuss this like adults. I am discussing it like an adult. That is the problem. For once, I am not swallowing my feelings to keep the peace. For once, I am not pretending everything is fine when it has not been fine for years. As my parents prepared to leave, my mother delivered her parting shot. I suppose this tantrum is what we should expect. You always did struggle with emotional regulation. Remember when you did not make the debate team in 10th grade and locked yourself in your room for days? Dylan never had those kinds of outbursts. That was the final straw. Dylan never had those outbursts because Dylan never tried for anything challenging enough to risk failure. And for the record, I locked myself in my room because that was the same week I found out my boyfriend was cheating on me. And neither of you even noticed I was upset until I missed dinner. My father looked stricken, a flash of recognition crossing his face. My mother merely pursed her lips and guided Dylan toward the door. "Come on, son. Let your sister have some space to collect herself." Dylan hesitated, looking torn between his usual allegiance to our mother and some new uncomfortable awareness. "Ella, I never meant to just go," I said, suddenly exhausted. "Enjoy your free apartment and your endless chances. The bank of mom and dad is always open for you." After they left, Marie and my two remaining friends helped clean up in silence. The beautiful cake sat mostly uneaten. The candles removed the frosting message, "Happy birthday, Elaine," slightly smudged where someone had absently run a finger through it. "I am so sorry," I said to them. "That was not how I wanted this evening to go." Marie hugged me tightly. "Do not apologize. That was 30 years overdue." When everyone had gone and I was alone in my condo, surrounded by the remnants of my ruined birthday, I finally allowed myself to cry. The drive home from my own party was surreal. I had not actually gone anywhere, but emotionally I had traveled miles. As I sat in my parked car in the garage of my own building, tears streaming down my face, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier than I had in years. The weight of unspoken truths had lifted, only to be replaced by the burden of wondering what would happen next. Rain began to patter against the windshield, matching the rhythm of my thoughts as they tumbled over one another. Memories flooded back now, viewed through a lens cleared of the fog of family obligation. I remembered my high school graduation, where my parents had left early because Dylan, then a freshman, had a minor role in a school play the same evening. "He needs us there," Mom had explained. "You understand you are so self-sufficient." I recalled my college graduation ceremony sitting alone because my family was late. They had arrived just as my name was called, missing my honors recognition because Dylan had insisted on stopping for breakfast at his favorite restaurant 2 hours away from campus. The time I landed my first professional accounting job calling home excitedly, only to have the conversation cut short because Dylan was having a crisis over a failed relationship. My promotion to senior accountant announced during a family dinner that quickly became focused on Dylan's latest business idea. My 30th birthday, which had been a rushed affair because it fell the same weekend as one of Dylan's friends' destination weddings, which our parents attended instead. Each memory carried the same message: Dylan's needs, wants, and even whims would always take precedence over my most significant life events. As the rain intensified, a text message illuminated my phone screen. It was from my mother. "I hope you are pleased with yourself. Dylan is very upset by your outburst. Call me when you are ready to apologize." No concern for my feelings, no acknowledgement of the pain behind my words, just the expectation that I would, as always, be the one to smooth things over. A second text followed this one from Dylan. "Hey sis, sorry about tonight. You know how mom gets. Hope you're still enjoying your B-day." The casual tone, the subtle shifting of blame to our mother rather than accepting his role. The misspelled words as if taking the time to write properly was too much effort. All of it crystallized something for me. This was not just about tonight. This was about a lifetime of patterns that would continue unless something changed. I scrolled through my phone to a photo taken last Christmas, showing Dylan proudly holding up the keys to his apartment. The luxury building downtown that I knew charged at least $3,000 a month for its smallest units, an amount Dylan could not possibly afford on his non-existent income. With sudden clarity, I realized that I had been enabling this dysfunction just as much as my parents had. By always being the responsible one, by never making waves, by accepting the unequal treatment as simply how things were, I had allowed the situation to continue. Worse, I had been directly subsidizing Dylan's lifestyle in ways I had not fully acknowledged. His Netflix and Spotify accounts were on my family plan. I had added him to my cell phone family plan 3 years ago when he was just getting his business started and needed to save money temporarily. I had set up automatic payments for his utility bills last winter when he complained about forgetting due dates and getting hit with late fees. All these small helps had become permanent arrangements that he took for granted, part of the invisible support system that kept him comfortable in his irresponsibility. Opening my laptop, I logged into my bank account and began reviewing automatic payments. The evidence was worse than I had imagined. Beyond the subscriptions and phone bill, I discovered that I had been paying for his renter's insurance after setting it up temporarily 2 years ago. My credit card showed regular charges from food delivery services to his address services I had authorized when he was recovering from a minor outpatient procedure 18 months ago. But that had never been discontinued. As I dug deeper, the full picture emerged of how my brother had become financially entangled in my life, taking advantage of my organizational skills and reliability. Each small expense on its own had seemed manageable, a minor help for family. Together they represented nearly $600 monthly that I was essentially gifting to someone who showed no appreciation for it. A notification popped up on my screen, an email from my father with the subject line, "Your mother is very upset." I closed it without reading. For once, I would not be the one to make peace at the expense of my own dignity. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and began researching family psychology and enabling behaviors. Article after article described situations eerily similar to mine. The responsible sibling who becomes trapped in a caretaker role. The parents who enable one child's dependence while expecting independence from another. The golden child syndrome. It was as if these psychologists had been observing my family for years. Marie called around midnight, checking in on me. "How are you holding up?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "I am having some realizations," I replied, staring at my screen full of open tabs about family dynamics and financial boundaries. "Like what, B?" "Like I have been enabling my brother just as much as my parents have, and it stops now." "What are you going to do?" Marie asked, a note of worry in her voice. "Set boundaries, real ones, and the first step is cutting the financial ties." We talked for another hour, Marie offering perspective as someone who had known me since college. She reminded me of instances where I had downplayed my resentment, times when I had made excuses for Dylan's behavior, occasions when I had stepped in to solve problems he had created for himself. "You deserve better," she said finally. "And honestly, so does Dylan. He will never grow up if everyone keeps treating him like a child." After we hung up, I made a list of every financial connection between Dylan and myself, from the smallest subscription to the largest recurring payment. Beside each item, I wrote out a plan for disconnection. Some were simple cancellations. Others would require conversations with service providers. A few would mean finding replacement services for myself to avoid disruption to my own life. By the time dawn broke, casting golden light across my kitchen table covered in notes and plans, I had made my decision. This was not about punishment or revenge. It was about finally treating both Dylan and myself as the adults we were supposed to be. It was about refusing to participate any longer in a family system that had been slowly drowning both of us, just in different ways. I would be kind but firm. I would explain my actions clearly. I would offer support in the form of information and guidance if asked, but no longer in the form of money or services. I would love my brother enough to let him face the consequences of his choices, and I would love myself enough to stop sacrificing my financial security on the altar of family peace. As I showered and prepared for work, a strange sense of calm settled over me. For the first time in years, perhaps in my entire adult life, I felt truly in control of my relationship with my family. Whatever happened next, it would be on new terms that included respect for my boundaries and acknowledgement of my worth. The journey would not be easy. Decades of established patterns do not change overnight. But as I closed my apartment door behind me and headed for the office, I knew that the first step had already been taken. The old Elaine, the one who swallowed her feelings and paid the bills without complaint, had blown out her candles for the last time. The week after my birthday became a methodical dismantling of the financial web, connecting me to Dylan. I approached it like an audit at work, systematic and thorough, leaving no shared account unexplored. First came the entertainment subscriptions. I logged into Netflix, Disney Plus, and Spotify, removing Dylan's profile and access. I changed passwords and enabled two-factor authentication to prevent him from logging back in. For each service, I sent him a brief text. I have removed you from my account. You will need to set up your own subscription if you want to continue using this service. His first responses were casual, almost amused. Wow, still mad about your birthday, little extreme LL. I did not engage with the attempt to minimize what had happened. I simply continued with my plan. Next came the phone plan. I called my provider and split our family plan, keeping my line and removing his. The customer service representative seemed confused when I declined to inform the other user before making the change. He is an adult, I explained. He can set up his own phone service. Within hours, Dylan's text shifted from casual to concerned. My phone says service is about to be suspended. What's going on? I have removed you from my phone plan. I texted back. You will need to establish your own service. Are you serious right now? Over one comment Mom made. I did not respond to that bait. This was not about one comment. This was about 32 years of comments' expectations and unequal treatment. The utilities were more complicated since I had set them up using my information. But for his address, I had to contact each company individually. I explained that I would no longer be responsible for accounts at an address where I did not reside. Some companies required written notices of termination. Others needed his information to transfer responsibility. For those, I simply initiated service cancellation with appropriate notice periods. By the third day, my parents had been fully briefed by Dylan and entered the fray. My mother's calls went straight to voicemail. My father, however, caught me during lunch. Elaine, what is this about you canceling Dylan's phone and utilities? He asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and disapproval. I am removing myself financially from Dylan's life, I replied calmly. He is 29 years old. He can manage his own expenses. But he is not in a position to take on all these costs right now, my father protested. His business is just starting to gain traction. His business has been just starting to gain traction for 4 years, Dad. And in the meantime, I have been subsidizing his lifestyle without acknowledgement or appreciation. We appreciate what you do for your brother, my father said, his voice softening into the conciliatory tone he always used during family conflicts. No, you do not. You expect it. There is a difference. After a pause, my father tried a different approach. Your mother is very upset about all this. She thinks you are punishing Dylan for her comment at your party. I am not punishing anyone. I am establishing healthy boundaries. Dylan has been using my Netflix for 3 years. He has been on my phone plan for just as long. I have been paying his utilities since he moved into that apartment. None of these were meant to be permanent arrangements, but they became that way because he never took responsibility. We did not realize you were doing so much, my father admitted, a note of genuine surprise in his voice. That is part of the problem. No one notices what I contribute because it is expected. Meanwhile, Dylan gets praised for showing up to a birthday party with a gift you and Mom probably paid for. The silence on the other end of the line told me I had hit close to the truth. Dad, I love you and Mom and even Dylan. But this dynamic is not healthy for any of us. Dylan needs to stand on his own feet. You and Mom need to let him grow up, and I need to stop enabling all of it. After we hung up, I continued my financial separation plan. I contacted Dylan's landlord, whom I had been communicating with whenever there were maintenance issues in the apartment. I clarified that I was not a guarantor on the lease and should be removed as an emergency contact. The landlord seemed unsurprised, mentioning that several other tenants had family members who helped manage their affairs. That evening, Dylan called in a panic. The electricity is out at my apartment. The company says the bill is overdue, but you always pay that. Not anymore, I said evenly. I sent you notice 3 days ago that I would no longer be managing your utilities. But I do not have the money right now. I cannot sit here in the dark. You have options, Dylan. You can pay the bill yourself, ask Mom and Dad for help, or find somewhere else to stay until you figure it out. What you cannot do is expect me to continue carrying your financial burdens. This is cruel, Elaine. I never thought you would be so petty. His attempt to make me feel guilty might have worked in the past. Now I recognized it as manipulation. This is not pettiness, Dylan. This is me treating you like the adult you are. Adults pay their own bills. He hung up on me, and minutes later my mother called. I let it go to voicemail again, but listened to her message afterward. Elaine, your brother is sitting in a dark apartment because of your childish revenge scheme. Is this really who you want to be? Someone who hurts her family over a little jealousy? Call me back immediately. I texted her instead. Dylan is sitting in a dark apartment because he failed to pay his electric bill. He has been capable of managing his own finances for years, but has chosen not to. I am no longer participating in that choice. The next day brought an unexpected development. My father called again, this time with a different tone. I talked to Dylan last night. He said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. He admitted that he has been taking advantage of your generosity. He said you have been paying for things he could have managed himself. I waited, unsure where this was heading. Your mother still thinks you are being too harsh, but I wanted you to know that I understand what you are trying to do. It is not easy watching your children struggle, but maybe we have been too quick to step in. It was the closest my father had ever come to admitting that their parenting approach with Dylan might have been flawed. I felt a small spark of hope that perhaps some good could come from this difficult situation. Thank you for telling me that, Dad. This has not been easy for me either. Will you come to Sunday dinner this weekend? We can talk more then. I agreed, though, with clear boundaries. I will come, but I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine. We need to have honest conversations about these patterns if anything is going to change. By the end of the week, I had severed every financial tie between Dylan and myself. He had managed to get his electricity turned back on, presumably with our parents' help. His phone was working again, though he complained about having to sign a contract and pay a deposit due to his poor credit history. Some family, friends, and more distant relatives had gotten wind of the situation and taken sides. My aunt called to tell me I was being selfish. My cousin sent a supportive text saying it was about time someone in the family stood up to the obvious favoritism. Through it all, I maintained my resolve. This was not about winning or losing, not about punishment or revenge. It was about finally creating a family dynamic based on mutual respect rather than assigned roles and unspoken expectations. As I prepared for Sunday dinner, I knew that the hardest conversations were still ahead. Cutting financial ties had been the concrete first step. Addressing the emotional patterns that had led us here would be far more challenging. But for the first time, I was ready to have those conversations without apologizing for my feelings or minimizing my worth. Whatever happened next, it would be as equals, not as the responsible older sister and the eternally coddled younger brother. The old dynamic had been broken. What we built in its place would determine the future of our family. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had been a weekly tradition since I moved back to town after college. Usually it followed a predictable script. Mom would fuss over Dylan's favorite foods. Dad would ask about my work in the most general terms possible, and Dylan would entertain everyone with stories of his latest almost success. This Sunday was different from the moment I arrived. My mother opened the door with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Your brother is running late," she said, as if warning me not to comment on it. "That is fine," I replied neutrally. I brought dessert. I handed her the store-bought pie I had picked up, breaking my usual tradition of baking something from scratch. Small boundaries I had decided were still boundaries worth establishing. My father greeted me with an awkward hug. "Glad you came," he said quietly. The tension in the house was palpable. My mother busied herself in the kitchen, rejecting my offers of help with curt responses. My father turned on a football game but stared at it without his usual enthusiasm. When Dylan finally arrived 45 minutes late, he entered cautiously as if unsure of his welcome. "Hey," he said. nodding in my direction without making eye contact. "Hello, Dylan," I responded evenly. Dinner itself was a masterclass in strained conversation. We discussed the weather, a neighbor's new landscaping project, and an upcoming local festival, all while carefully avoiding any mention of birthdays, bills, or boundaries. It was my mother who finally broke the facade, setting down her fork with a clatter as we were halfway through the meal. "I simply cannot pretend everything is normal when it is not," she announced. "Elaine, your behavior this past week has been unconscionable." I took a deep breath. "What specifically do you find unconscionable?" "Mom, you know perfectly well shutting off your brother's utilities, canceling his phone service, leaving him stranded without warning. I sent him notice about each change before I made it," I corrected calmly. "And I did not shut off his utilities. I simply stopped paying for them. There is a difference. It amounts to the same thing when you know he cannot afford to pay them himself." I set my napkin beside my plate. "Why can he not afford to pay them, Mom? He is 29 years old. He has no student loans because you and Dad paid for his education. He lives in a luxury apartment. Where does his money go?" My mother's face flushed. "Your brother has had setbacks in his career. Not everyone finds their path as easily as you did." "I did not find my path easily. I worked for it. I made choices and sacrifices. I lived with roommates in a tiny apartment until I could afford my own place. I drove a 15-year-old car until last year. I packed lunches instead of ordering delivery. These are normal adult choices." My father cleared his throat. "Elaine has a point, Margaret. Dylan has had a lot of support, and he is not a kid anymore." My mother turned to him, betrayal written across her face. "So you are taking her side now?" "It is not about sides," my father said wearily. "It is about reality. We are not going to be around forever to help Dylan. And honestly, our retirement account cannot keep supporting 2 households." This was news to me. I looked sharply at my father. "What do you mean 2 households?" A heavy silence fell over the table. Dylan studied his plate intently. "Your father did not mean anything by that," my mother said quickly. "I think he did." "Dad, are you paying for Dylan's apartment?" My father sighed, looking older than his 62 years. "The rent, yes, and his car payment and his credit card minimums." The extent of my parents' financial entanglement with my brother was apparently even greater than I had realized. "How long has this been going on?" "Since he moved in there about 3 years," my father admitted. "And how is this affecting your retirement plans?" I asked the accountant in me, automatically calculating the impact. My father would not meet my eyes. "We have had to postpone retirement. I will probably work until at least 70 now. Dad, that is 8 more years. Your brother will be on his feet well before then." My mother interjected. "His networking is finally paying off. He has several promising leads." Dylan himself had remained suspiciously quiet during this exchange. I turned to him directly. "Do you have any actual paying clients right now?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I am in talks with a couple of potential big accounts." "That is not what I asked. Do you currently have anyone paying you for your services?" "Not at this exact moment." "No," he admitted reluctantly. "When was the last time you earned any income at all?" Dylan glanced at our mother, who jumped in before he could answer. This interrogation is exactly why family dinners have become so unpleasant. "Elaine, your constant competition with your brother has to stop." "This is not competition, Mom. These are legitimate questions about an adult man's ability to support himself. Questions that should have been asked years ago." The conversation devolved from there. My mother accused me of being heartless and judgmental. My father tried to mediate, but clearly struggled with his divided loyalties. Dylan alternated between defensive posturing and wounded victimhood. As the argument escalated, my mother suddenly pressed her hand to her chest and took a shallow breath. "I cannot handle this stress," she gasped. My heart is racing. My father was immediately at her side. Concern etched on his face. "Should we call the doctor?" I recognized the tactic, having seen it deployed whenever family conversations became too uncomfortable for my mother. Her heart episodes had been effectively shutting down difficult discussions for as long as I could remember, always without any medical confirmation of an actual problem. But seeing my father's genuine worry, I realized that he truly believed there might be a health issue. How many other dynamics in our family were built on such unstated assumptions and unquestioned patterns? I think I need to lie down, my mother said weakly, allowing my father to help her from the table. Dylan, would you bring me some water and my pills? Dylan jumped up immediately, casting a reproachful glance my way as if I had deliberately caused a medical emergency. Left alone at the dining table, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. This confrontation had revealed even more dysfunction than I had anticipated. My parents were compromising their retirement security to maintain my brother's unsustainable lifestyle. My mother was using health concerns to avoid accountability. My father was caught in the middle, aware of the problems, but unwilling to challenge the status quo directly. When my father returned to the table, he looked exhausted. Your mother is resting. I think it would be best if we continued this discussion another time. Dad, is Mom actually under a doctor's care for heart problems? I asked quietly. He hesitated. She gets anxious. The doctor gave her something for that. So it is anxiety, not a heart condition. The stress affects her physically, he said defensively. She worries about everyone, especially Dylan. And what about your stress working past retirement age to support a grown son who will not support himself? My father sank back into his chair. I just want everyone to be happy. But no one is happy, Dad. Mom is anxious. Dylan is dependent. You are overworked, and I have been feeling unvalued and taken for granted for years. For a long moment, my father was silent. Then, in a voice I had rarely heard him use, he said, I know, and I do not know how to fix it. That simple admission of helplessness from the man who had always been the family peacemaker hit me harder than any argument could have. For the first time, I saw my father not as the enabler of my mother's favoritism, but as someone equally trapped in patterns he did not know how to break. We fix it by being honest with each other, I said gently, and by treating each other as the adults we are, with both rights and responsibilities. Dylan returned then, his expression guarded. Mom is asking for you, Dad. As my father left to check on my mother, Dylan and I found ourselves alone together for the first time since my birthday. So this is your big solution? He asked bitterly. Tear the family apart. Make Mom sick with worry. Mom is making herself sick by refusing to face reality, I replied. And the family was already broken, Dylan. We just pretended it was not. Easy for you to say. You have always had everything together. Perfect. Della with her perfect career and perfect condo. Do you really believe that? That my life has been perfect and easy? Something in my tone made him look at me. Really? Look at me perhaps for the first time in years. I guess I do not actually know much about your life these days, he admitted. No, you do not. Just like I probably do not know much about yours beyond the financial aspects that have been forced into my awareness. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of all the real conversations. We had never had all the authentic connection that had been sacrificed to maintain our assigned family roles. I did not ask them to pay for everything, Dylan said, finally a defensive edge still in his voice. But something else there too, something that might have been the beginning of awareness. Maybe not explicitly, I acknowledged, but we all participate in the dynamic, Dylan, me included. I am trying to change my part in it. That is all I can control. Before he could respond, my father returned looking grim. Your mother would like you both to leave. She says she needs quiet to recover. The abrupt dismissal was classic. Mom, another control tactic I had seen many times. But as we gathered our things to go, I noticed my father press a folded piece of paper into Dylan's hand. Money almost certainly, the pattern continuing even in the midst of trying to address it. As we stepped outside into the early evening air, Dylan paused. For what it is worth, I did not know you were paying for so many of my bills. I mean, I knew about the Netflix and the phone, but not the utilities and stuff. Mom always said she was handling those. It was not quite an apology, but it was the most acknowledgement I had received from him in years. There has been a lot of lack of transparency in this family, I said. He nodded, then headed toward his car, the one our parents were apparently making payments on. I watched him go, wondering if today's revelations had made any real impact, or if the patterns were too deeply ingrained to change. As I drove home, I reflected on how the family dynamics had been laid bare today in ways both painful and necessary. My mother's health manipulation, my father's silent enabling Dylan's willful ignorance, my own role in maintaining the status quo, all of it exposed to the light of honest conversation. The approaching holidays loomed in my mind. Thanksgiving was just 6 weeks away, Christmas, not long after that. Traditional times for family togetherness that now seemed fraught with potential conflict. Would we revert to our comfortable roles to avoid tension? Or would we continue this difficult but necessary process of recalibrating our relationships? I did not have the answers yet, but I knew that I could not go back to the way things had been. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the same clarity and resolve that had guided me through the past week. The family system was shaking. Whether it would collapse entirely or rebuild itself on a healthier foundation remained to be seen. 6 months after the birthday that changed everything, I stood in my kitchen preparing a simple meal for a small gathering. The spring sunshine filtered through new curtains, casting warm patterns across countertops that now held only my own possessions, my own choices. The past half year had been a journey of separation and reconnection, of painful growth and unexpected discoveries. The changes in our family had come neither as quickly nor as dramatically as the initial confrontation might have suggested. There had been no movie moment where everyone suddenly saw the light and transformed overnight. Instead, there had been a slow, sometimes stumbling process of readjustment, with progress and setbacks occurring in equal measure. My brother Dylan had faced the harshest adjustment. Within 2 weeks of my financial separation, the reality of his situation had become impossible to ignore. His luxury apartment car payments, credit card bills, and lifestyle expenses far exceeded what our parents could continue to cover, especially once they began to reassess their own financial priorities. The first real shift came when Dylan was forced to downsize. He moved from his downtown luxury apartment to a modest one-bedroom in a less trendy neighborhood, the kind of place most people his age actually lived in. He sold his expensive car and bought a used sedan with the proceeds. He took a job not as a social media consultant or influencer, but as an entry-level marketing assistant at a local company with regular hours and expectations of actual productivity. "It is humiliating," he had complained during one of our infrequent phone calls in those early months. "I am qualified for so much more." "You will be," I had replied, "but not until you have some real experience and a work history to point to." Our mother had taken longer to adjust. For the first 2 months, she had alternated between tearful accusations about my cruelty and stone-cold silence. She had tried to maintain Dylan's previous lifestyle by dipping further into retirement savings until my father had finally put his foot down. "We cannot afford 2 households," he had told her firmly during a tense family dinner in February. "If we continue on this path, we will be dependent on our children in our old age. Is that what you want?" That reality check coming from the husband who had rarely contradicted her before had been a turning point. Not an immediate transformation, but the beginning of a shift in perspective that allowed her to see the long-term consequences of the patterns she had maintained for so long. My father had surprised me the most. Once he began speaking up about the financial realities, other truths followed. He started sharing stories of his own upbringing, of the strict independence his parents had expected of his determination to be more supportive of his children, and of how that good intention had somehow warped into enabling dependence in Dylan. I wanted to give him what I never had. He confessed during a lunch we shared in March. I did not realize I was taking away what I did have, which was self-reliance. Today's gathering would be the first time all 4 of us had been together in my home since the birthday disaster. Easter and a cousin's wedding had provided neutral territory for family interactions. But this dinner represented something more intentional, a chosen reconnection rather than an obligatory one. The doorbell rang precisely at 6. My mother stood on the threshold holding a bouquet of spring flowers, my father beside her with a bottle of wine. Dylan arrived 5 minutes later, no longer chronically late now that he had a job with actual consequences for tardiness. Conversation during the meal was sometimes stilted, sometimes surprisingly easy. We discussed work community events, a movie we had all seen separately. The old patterns tried to reassert themselves. Occasionally, my mother asking Dylan excessive questions about his job prospects. My father changing the subject when tensions rose. Dylan looking to me to smooth things over. But there were new patterns, too. My mother complimented the meal I had prepared without adding that Dylan needed home cooking more than I did. My father asked detailed questions about a challenging audit I was conducting at work, showing genuine interest. Dylan mentioned a date he had the previous weekend without expecting anyone to finance his romantic pursuits. After dinner, as we sat with coffee and the dessert my mother had brought, she cleared her throat nervously. "I have been seeing someone," she announced. "A therapist for my anxiety." The admission hung in the air, momentous in its vulnerability. My mother, who had always maintained that therapy was for people who could not handle their problems, who had used undiagnosed health issues to control family dynamics, was acknowledging both her anxiety and her decision to address it professionally. "That is wonderful, Mom," I said sincerely. "It has been helpful," she continued, her fingers fidgeting with her napkin. "We have been discussing family patterns." She suggested that I might have been well unfair in my expectations of you, Elaine, and perhaps too protective of Dylan. Dylan looked down at his plate. "She is right, Mom. You did not do me any favors." "I just wanted you to be happy," she said, her voice small. "I know," Dylan replied, "but I was not really just comfortable. There is a difference." My father reached over and covered my mother's hand with his own. "We all did what we thought was best. Now we know better." It was not a perfect resolution. My mother still sometimes slipped into old habits of favoring Dylan. My father still occasionally tried to smooth over conflicts rather than address them directly. Dylan still had moments of entitlement and expectation, and I still sometimes felt the sting of old hurts and unequal treatment. But the difference was that now we could name these patterns. We could call them out gently but firmly and redirect ourselves toward healthier interactions. We were learning, however imperfectly, to relate to each other as the adults we actually were, rather than the roles we had played for so long. As for me, the past 6 months had brought changes beyond my family relationships. Without the emotional and financial drain of supporting Dylan, I had found new energy for my own life. I had joined a hiking group, started taking photography classes, and even begun dating again after years of focusing primarily on work and family obligations. I had learned that boundaries were not just walls to keep others out, but definitions of self that allowed for more authentic connections. I had discovered that standing up for my own worth did not diminish my capacity for compassion, but actually enhanced it, allowing me to care for others from a place of choice rather than obligation. Most importantly, I had learned that real love, whether familial or otherwise, demanded honesty. It required seeing people as they truly were with all their strengths and weaknesses, rather than the roles we assigned them or the projections we placed upon them. As we finished our dessert and the conversation flowed more easily, I looked around at my imperfect, struggling, growing family and felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. We were not fixed, but we were healing. We were not perfect, but we were becoming more real with each other. The next birthday would be Dylan's just a few weeks away. I had already bought him a gift, a practical but thoughtful one that acknowledged his new life circumstances. It was wrapped and waiting in my closet, purchased with money I could genuinely spare, and chosen with love that came from seeing him clearly, perhaps for the first time. Bills do not pay themselves. That simple truth had been the catalyst for changes none of us could have imagined 6 months ago. In standing firm on that reality, I had helped my family face others as well, painful but necessary if we were to grow beyond the limitations we had placed on ourselves and each other. As I walked my family to the door at the end of the evening, my mother hugged me a real embrace rather than the perfunctory one I had grown accustomed to. "Thank you," she whispered, "for loving us enough to tell the truth." In that moment, I understood that the greatest gift we can give those we love is not protection from life's realities, but the courage to face them and the faith that they are strong enough to do so. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took you for granted? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about personal growth through challenging situations, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most healing relationships.